Hi. What do you assume that energy medicine, narcissism, and triangulation have to do with each other? So I am super grateful to be working with people from all over the world, which affords me the grand pleasure of working with people who teach what I teach in different ways than I teach it, and some of my students I get to learn from. So I'm taking an energy medicine course from one of my past clients who is like a brother to me in this playing field of life at this point. And I feel very humbled to get to learn from my students and my children. And I've been in energy medicine for a really long time. Most of my work is in the energy realm. If you've worked with me personally, you know this. We work with the energy first, and the cognitions obviously stem from the energy, so we have to kind of work backwards so we can embody a new transmuted kind of energy. And when I first stepped into the energy world, it was with Reiki. And Reiki is great, but it's a channel. And when I first started doing Reiki, it reminded me of when I would be very young and lay hands on my friends intuitively. I had a group of friends and we would get together and we would just lay hands on each other. Of course, we were like doing psychedelics and, having a good time. But it was innate and intuitive to tap into those channels within ourselves. So I asked Edward, who maybe if you are on my newsletter list, I'll share his work with you at some point, but I asked him about the difference between what he's teaching and Reiki. Because in my experience, although I'm a Reiki practitioner, it's a channel that to me, and this is just my experience, and I'm super appreciative of all of the practitioners out there that are doing this work in a real serious way, but it's a limiting channel for me because it's a channel that I have to tap into, which I guess is always true about when you're doing energy work, but when it comes to Reiki, it feels like a narrowing. And when I do work, I tend, I've woken up many times with scrapes, and about probably 6 months ago, I woke up with a straight up burn on my stomach. And my whole family was like, what is going on? How does that even happen to somebody? Nothing. I mean, it's such a bad degree of a burn that it has scarred. It's left an enormous scar on my stomach. And there's really no sense in it. My youngest daughter and I both have a lot of tendencies to be open and vulnerable in our sleep. But I also come from a soul line of being an energy healer, which is something that's always been innate to me. I've had many shamans say to me, you've been a shaman in so many lives that it's just, this is just part of who you are. But I asked him, because what he's teaching feels more like it's my channel than having to tap into the Reiki channel. And I appreciate that because it feels expansive and it doesn't feel like I have to narrow inside of my body to feel the embodiment of the person that I'm working with, because I've had a tendency to keep that which I work with, right? And it has physical ramifications for me. So when I asked him what the difference is between, this energy work and Reiki, one of the things that he said to me, which I thought was incredibly brilliant, was that I have, because when I was a little girl, let me go back. When I was a little girl, I remember being 5 years old, and I would say this prayer every single night of my life. I would say, God, and I never did not believe in God, right? And I went to a church that was literally like hell on earth, and I was like, these people have it all wrong. Like, what is happening here? This dogma is insane. But since I was very, very small, I've always known I was not alone. That's why I was always very good, because I knew that I was not alone, that somebody was watching me, even when I was in a room by myself. And I would pray every single night, I would say, God, please take away the pain of the world and put it all on me. I'm strong enough to handle it. I swear I am. And I would, a 5-year-old making this her responsibility and concern is probably not normal, right? So I would say this prayer, and I told Edward that I would say this prayer, and that my body, in a lot of ways, has taken on that vow that for some reason I probably came in from a past life with this intention to take away the pain of the world, and thought that I would be strong enough to carry it. And when my body gets sick and I actually become afraid of that vow, I no longer think that I can carry it, right? So sometimes I'm supercharged, like I can be strong enough to do this work, and then other times I'm like, no, nobody's strong enough to do what you're trying to do, Stacy. No body can hold all of that, can contain all of that, and not have a way to release it. So one of the things that he said was that I've been a shaman in so many past lives that in a tribal setting, which I remember past lives in ways like this, he said in a tribal setting, you had a context for that gift. You were taught how to use it. You were shown, because the shaman is somebody who takes away the pain of somebody else and transmutes it. But as a little girl, I was surrounded by everybody's pain body in a dynamic of narcissism on top of that, not being good enough, praying that their pain would stop so they would finally see me and love me, and that me taking away their pain, which was what I felt like I was obligated to do based on past lives and the circumstances that I chose to be born into. He said, not having a tribe to teach you the context for that gift is debilitating. And I want to just point this out to you. If you're somebody who really entrains with other people's pain bodies because you're empathic, okay? So there's one thing, right? It was really brilliant because I've released sacred vows and energy work before of poverty, of things like that. I've never, and I still was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that because it feels so true to my soul to be that person. I've never released the sacred vow of that shamanic aspect of being the person to transmute the pain for other people. And I did this in this work that we were doing the other night. And one of the things that I asked was, especially one of my clients that I work with, were very, very resonant. And she tends to attract people that I entrain with when I work with her. And I didn't super understand this while I was asking him this question until today, when I worked with her and she reflected something to me that I thought was really interesting, which is, I'm sorry if you can hear that, I'm not sure if you can. It's distracting me. Sorry. Hey, babe. It's Chris. Yeah. I can hear you, and it's distracting me. Can you please be quiet? Yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that. So, I asked him, I said, sometimes, hooks, when we talk about hooks and releasing cords and things like that, when I'm waking up with physical symptoms, I know I'm hooked into something that in the etheric realm, it sounds crazy to believe, but there's no other explanation for it. And mind you, the client that I'm talking about is a medical doctor, okay? So, and she actually saw this burn and she was like, that there's no context for that making sense. Like that did not, there's no context for that. So I was talking about hooks and I said, well, I don't really have hooks from one-to-one interactions with people as much, in this case with her, as I do with the people that she entrains with. And I was asking if that's like what that is. And the answer was pretty vague and ambiguous at this point, but when I spoke to her today, I told her a story about what had happened over the weekend, and she felt hooked by somebody that I was sharing with her about that was a little bit of a triangulation, right? So it wasn't me to her, and she wasn't hooked by my story. She was hooked by a character in my story, and a light bulb went off for me. Because when you're raised in a narcissistic home, the triangulation is everywhere. You are systematically trained not even to just be hooked with the person in front of you that you're having a direct relationship with, but you are trained to look to another point of that complex dynamic, right? So in this case, her mom called her and said, your dad told me to ask you this thing. When we know, if you're from a system like ours, she's asking what she's saying that her dad is asking her to ask, right? And that triangulation is constant. And when I think of it in context of her, and I go, oh, I'm interested in the fact that when she talks to me about this other person, I am hooked in a triangle with this other person. And I want to point this out so you can explore this on your own, because I don't super have answers for it. But what I do have is this overlay of energetic wisdom with cognitive awareness, which is that if you're empathic and you're coming in and your soul is a healer, and you're working with somebody who is working with other people who are toxic or who are just somehow they're resonant enough with your voids that they get into you. We're so used to triangulation. We're so used to it. A normal shaman who's trained to transmute energy, they might look at somebody and transmute their energy and transmute the energy of everybody who's ever hooked into them within that person, right? But if you're somebody who's untrained as a healer, but you are a healer, and you were raised in a narcissistic home, and you're used to triangulation, so you go, oh, what was the cause that created this effect? Let me look over here, because I can see that we're having this conversation, but something else has contributed to this reality. And then we entrain with a tip of a triangle that's not even in the room, but we can feel it. I want to say that those hooks are real. And I think that the focus that we need to have is linear, right? I'm a very circular person. I do not think in straight lines. Numbers don't make any sense to me. But when it comes to circular, healing is not a linear process. It's just not a linear process. And I get that. But when it comes to straight lines, I'm like, there's too much going on here. I need to kind of almost divert and break up the energy by looking elsewhere. And I think retrospectively hearing her say that she entrained with a character that I was sharing in my story, and I said, this is so funny because this is what I talked to my guy who I'm doing this energy work class with about for you specifically. We're both doing that. We were both cognitively taught, and we're both healers, to triangulate. And that triangulation has balanced out the system in our energy, in our lives, and in our minds, right? It's not always direct. When you're raised in a narcissistic home, nothing is direct. You're like, what is going on here? Like, you just said one thing and it's another thing. Like, what the hell is happening? So we look to what is the hell happening? Like, what's the other thing that's happening here, because you're not being clear with me. So I look to see what's going on with her based on the people she entrains with. And she looked, when I told her the story, to what was going on with the person that I was speaking about. She entrained with him instead of the story about him. So I just want to point this out, that if you are a healer and you are untrained in how to truly not take it on, but to transmute it so it doesn't affect you physically in your body, and you were raised in a narcissistic home, you're going to be hooked by triangulating, and I don't want to say entities, but we're all entities, right? But triangulating beings that are just a part of the triangle that might not even know you exist, right? But you're so used to being triangulated that you look at relationships in a triangulating fashion, or some, I should say. And maybe this was a mirror. Her and I tend to be mirrors a little bit, so it's really fun to work with her because I can parallel and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and it's very interesting because I always have things come up for me that end up showing up in the session for some reason. It's like God works through me first, and then I go, oh, that's why that thing happened for me, because I was able to now say this to you. And I think that that's what happened in this context. But when you're so used to triangulating or being triangulated, you tend to resonate with not one person in a story, which is enough if you are a healer, right, to take that on, but two people in a story, or more than that even. If you take the point of the triangle and you or you resonate with a point of the triangle, and then you go, oh, that person's resonating with these other points of another triangle, and then it's this big geometric, like, insane thing that you're trying to connect all of the dots with, instead of it being direct and linear. And I think that part of our work, part of this work, especially if you are a healer, and I know a lot of you are, and you're raised in a narcissistic home, you triangulate, and you're hooked by triangulations, not even just the person or the people that you are working with or that you are interacting with or around. So explore that in yourself. Just explore it. I don't really have answers. I just want to put it out there. I don't even really know what the question is, to be honest. But when I think of my channel, right, instead of me, and this was another interesting thing that I want to point out, which was really interesting to me, actually. He said, well, when you are trained in a form like Reiki, that even comes with the inherited dogma, and there's not a lot of dogma in Reiki, but it comes with a line of you're in training with all these other people who've ever entrained in the channel of Reiki. Whereas when you're doing work outside of that, you're basically in training with your soul instead of the channel of Reiki. And if my soul can, narrow into the channel of Reiki, I know I'm a great Reiki healer, but when I can expand and go, okay, I'm not narrowed by that channel, I'm actually in my channel so much that I'm expansive, so that there's not a lot of voids that can get in when I'm doing energy healing. I'm so expansive within my own energy body. I'm not narrowed by going, okay, I'm tuning into the channel of Reiki. Reiki, please, for the highest good of yada, yada, yada. I am literally filled with source, so that there's not a lot of room for something else to get in. And it was really interesting to me because he was saying that, yeah, when you're in a way, and I don't want to get too far off in this because maybe I'm making things up in this context, but like you're triangulating with all of the other people. If you were raised like me, I'm not saying this is for normal Reiki practitioners, who have ever been trained in Reiki and who are out there practicing Reiki right now, right? Because you're tuning into the channel and you are empathic and you are in training and you are surrounded by all of those geometric shapes that are going, you're connecting all these dots, right? So that was an interesting thing, right? So I just want to point out that if you are a healer and you are used to triangulation, the hooks that you are getting in your energy body might be coming from many angles that aren't even in the room. And I think our work really is to focus on directness, which is very uncomfortable if you've been raised in a narcissistic home, because conflict isn't allowed by you, because you'll be the crazy one. If there's anything wrong, that you say there's anything wrong with the system, you're crazy. So confrontation isn't allowed, conflict isn't allowed, or you'll be thrown in a psychiatric unit and told that you're the problem, right? So, yeah, just explore that. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that it makes sense to somebody in the world. I love you. I hope you have a great holiday season and an amazing new year. And I will be back to hopefully charge it up and see you guys soon. Bye. Thanks for listening.